So in December of 1577, it was a long time ago, there was a young monk named Juan de Yepes, and he was seized by the ones he called his brothers. He'd been calling for a reform within, it was called the Carmelite Order of the Catholic Church. And, some though saw this reform that he was calling for as unnecessary and rebellious. And, if you read about reformations, the people most often who resist the Reformation are the ones you're calling that they need to reform. So they're the ones that seized Juan de Yepes and locked him in the equivalent of a 6x10 storage closet. And there was only like a little small slit in the ceiling where a little bit of light could get through during the day. But at nighttime, it was always complete and total darkness. I mean, it was cold, the air was stale. His diet was bread, water, and maybe some salted fish. Every once in a while. The cell was infested by lice. And once a week, he was drug out of the cell, put on display in front of all of the community, and flogged in shame. For 9 months, this is what Juan de Yepes endured. Yet in the darkness, it was there that he composed verses in his mind. He kept repeating these verses to get him through. And since, there was nowhere to write them down, his only way to have them stick was to repeat them over and over and over and over again. Well, after 9 months of this torture, he was actually able to escape his cell. And then he composed, using these verses, it was called The Dark Night of the Soul, which would become, it's a classic piece of Christian literature, but it's still one of the most influential pieces of Christian literature ever written. Juan de Yepes is known today, they renamed him as Saint John of the Cross. And he was renamed and given that name, Saint John of the Cross, because he knew what it was like to live beneath the weight of suffering and to endure the dark night. And in doing so, he discovered a truth that most of us tend to resist. Listen to me. The dark night of the soul is a gift. It's a gift. See, what St. John of the Cross recited in his prison cell, it wasn't a lament. It wasn't a woe is me. It was a love poem. The Dark Night of the Soul, if you read it, it's actually a love poem about how a soul sneaks away in the dead of night to find its divine lover in the darkness. We tend to chase these peak religious experiences. We all do it where we feel close to God and we're constantly going here and going here and going here so we can feel God and, get high on God's presence, so to say. We tend to do that. And on one hand, how beautiful those experiences can be. But I want to caution us because that mindset always carries a subtle danger, though. We can begin to chase those experiences and feelings at all costs. And we begin to assume that feeling God in only a butterfly feeling kind of way, that's when God's close. And if we don't feel a certain way, that must means that, God's not close or he's not in it. But what happens, and we've all experienced this, right? What happens when those experiences either disappear altogether or are very few and far between? I mean, what happens when we can't and don't feel it? What happens when our prayers feel dry, like we're just talking to the ceiling? What happens when it feels like God has checked out, left the building, and is on vacation? I mean, has he? See, we tend to think that when we feel this way, and I know that y'all have felt this way, maybe you are feeling that way right now. But when we feel this way, we tend to think it's because we're lacking intimacy with God, right? But St. John of the Cross would say that when we start to feel this way, it's actually the beginning of true intimacy with God. Because only when we're laid bare, only when we have nothing else to prop us up, only when we have no spiritual performance to look to how good I'm doing right now, when we have no feelings to point to, that is when we encounter God himself. Not the things that come from God, but God himself, as he truly, truly is. Barbara Brown Taylor wrote this: "I have learned things in the dark that I could never have learned in the light. Things that have saved my life over and over again, so that there is only one really logical conclusion. I need darkness as much as I need light." So go ahead and turn your Bibles to Genesis chapter 37. This is part one of our series called For Good on the life of Joseph. And the message for today is called The Dark Night of the Soul. So let's go ahead and kind of just get into Joseph's story and what is going on here. So Joseph's story starts in Genesis chapter 37. Let's look at verse 3. "Now Israel," you may also know him by Jacob, "loved Joseph more than any of his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him." All of us have some level of family dysfunction. Right? You with your family, just keep looking at me. Don't look to the side. Just keep looking ahead, forward at me. None of that. Just do that. But we all have some level of family dysfunction, right? But if you want to feel better about yourself and your family, this one takes the cake, right? This family is the most dysfunctional family probably ever, okay? This is a mess, okay? So Jacob had two primary wives. I can only handle one. Don't know how this guy had two. But he had two wives, Leah and Rachel, okay? And two concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah. And between all of these women, I mean, this is like, what's that show on HBO, Sister Wives or whatever? I mean, this is next level, okay? So between all of these women and wives and concubines, Jacob had 12 sons, who eventually became the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, Jacob's favorite wife was Rachel. You're my favorite wife, don't worry. But Jacob's favorite wife was Rachel. And Jacob and Rachel's firstborn son together was Joseph. So that's why Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. And I mean, this guy advertised it. I mean, this wasn't some kids joke like, "Oh yeah, you've always been dad's favorite." Like, this wasn't like a, side little joke here. Jacob just advertised it. I mean, this was not something implied. This was just the reality. I mean, Jacob gave him a coat that boldly advertised, "You are my favorite." So we have a foolish father playing favorites. We've got a spoiled son, which is Joseph, a whole host of other sons who hate their brother Joseph. And this is already a powder keg. This is a mess. But then something happens that kind of pushes all of this, to the breaking point. Verse 5. "Now Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. His brothers said to him, are you indeed to reign over us, or are you indeed to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. But when he told it to his father and his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Now, we're going to come back to these dreams, and especially what it says in verse 11. Actually, on Palm Sunday, we're going to unpack this. That's how prepared I am for this, by the way. Thank you. You guys think I just wing it? No, I mean, I'm prepared for this, okay? Anyway, but just for now, just acknowledge that Joseph, I mean, he's already a spoiled guy, and he comes out and, yeah, I had a dream, and guess what? I mean, this already pushes this to the breaking point, and this is an already dysfunctional situation, and it just kind of boils over the top. Look at verse 18. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, here comes the dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. Now, this is just a quick side note. Reuben here, he comes and suggests that they don't throw Joseph, they don't kill Joseph, but rather just throw him into the pit. Let's not lay a hand on him, let's just throw him into the pit. And did you catch this? Why did he say that? Because he wants to come back, rescue Joseph, and return him to his father. And do you know why he wanted to do that? Kind of, but look at Genesis 35:22. When Israel lived in that land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. So Reuben, Jacob's son, slept with his father's concubine, and Jacob found out about it. So Reuben, he suggests that they spare Joseph's life, not because, he wanted to be a good guy or valiant or, had this, well, guys, let's just cool it and save Joseph. No, he did it to regain his father's favor because he was on the outs. So just more and more and more dysfunction in this whole family mess. But this is going to be a theme of this series. Even this crazy dysfunction, this dysfunction ends up being the thing that saves Joseph's life. Look what happens in verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Sound familiar? They took Joseph to Egypt. So instead of Joseph being killed, as was the original plan, because all of this dysfunction is swirling in this family, Joseph, though, ends up being sold and then ends up in Egypt. Chad Bird wrote this: broken humans are the actors in this account, yes, but a merciful God authored the narrative. Sinners are doing what sinners do best, messing everything up. And God is doing what God does best. He's weaving events replete with hatred and horror into a finished product of redemption that we could never have foreseen. That's the story of Joseph in a nutshell. And as we'll see in the coming weeks, I mean, this is it. All of this brokenness and dysfunction and horrible things that happen, it's all weaved together somehow, some way for an amazing plan of redemption that only God could write. But as for this morning, a lot of times we're way too quick to skip through and get past the pit of the story. Y'all clapped about the redemption, and that's true. We all like to clap for that. We know, oh, I know how the story ends. Yeah, we know. But we're really quick to skip past the dark night of the soul. And we're quick to skip past the pit. And what it was like for Joseph on that wagon, being sold as a slave on his way to Egypt. We want to get through all of that stuff because we're eager to get to the good parts and the highs of the story. We want to talk about the overcoming and the triumphs and the turnaround. But when we do that, we miss what God does in the dark. See, in this moment, let's just stop here for this week, this Sunday. I know you probably know how the story ends. Let's forget it, because in this moment, Joseph doesn't know any of that, right? He don't know any good parts of his story. He was just betrayed by his brothers, thrown in a pit, left for dead, and now he's sold as a slave on his way to Egypt. There's no good parts of the story yet. All he knew in this moment, all Joseph knew in this moment was the dark night of the soul. I think we as Christians have an unhealthy obsession with thinking that we're God's PR department. Don't we? I mean, we think it's our job to explain away our and other people's confusion and suffering and struggles and doubts and pain, that it's our job to explain away the dark. Like it doesn't exist or something. And when we do that, we're communicating that God is only in the light. God's only on the mountaintop. God's only in the palace at the end of the story, and we just got to get there and get through the dark so we can meet him. But when we do that, we're skipping past the very places where I believe God chooses to reveal himself the most. In the dark, in the pit, in confusion, in struggles, in doubts, in fears. That's where we really learn to know who God is. When we rush to explain away the dark, we aren't protecting God's reputation. We're diminishing the fullness of who he is. I wonder if, we want to make everything inspiring. Christians, we really do, right? I mean, we want to make everything inspiring. But in doing that, I think we're inadvertently communicating that weakness doesn't belong, or that confusion doesn't belong, that struggling and suffering in those moments when we don't feel it means that there's something wrong with us, and we need to get through it and get past it and need to figure out how to get through it. I mean, think about it. When there is confusion and struggling and suffering and doubt and just not feeling it, when there's darkness, we immediately try to fix it. We're in fix-it mode. Well, have you tried this? Have you done this? Let's try this. We do that all the time. But maybe, just maybe, the dark isn't something to fix. Maybe the dark isn't something to just get over. Because maybe, listen to me, maybe we can't really know God without the dark. Look at what Paul wrote in Philippians chapter 3. I want to know Christ and experience the mighty power that raised him from the dead. Look what he says. I want to suffer with him, sharing in his death, so that one way or another I will experience the resurrection from the dead. Paul's saying, above all the other things in this world, I want to know God. That's what I want. I just want to know him. And he recognizes you can't know God without knowing the dark. You can't know God without knowing suffering and pain and struggle. You can't fully know who Jesus and who God is without the dark night of the soul. Nicholas Wolterstorff, he wrote a book called Lament for a Son. And he wrote it after his 25-year-old son died in a mountain climbing accident. And this is what he wrote. It is said of God that no one can behold his face and live. I always thought this meant that no one could see his splendor and live. A friend said, perhaps it meant that no one could see his sorrow and live. Or perhaps his sorrow is his splendor. To know God is to know the dark night of the soul. So maybe the dark, whatever you go through, maybe the pit, so to say, maybe that's not a punishment of some kind. You know, we tend to think that it is, being punished. No. Or maybe it's some kind of test for God to assess how we handled it. I don't think so. Maybe the dark in our lives, whatever that may be, the pits of life, maybe it's actually a gift. On a dark night kindled in love with yearnings, oh happy chance, I went forth without being observed, my house being now at rest. Those are the words that St. John of the Cross wrote in that prison cell. In that dark 6x10 lice-infested storage closet. I mean, think about this. That in that situation, he wrote a love poem. A love poem. One semester in college, I had a night class on Monday nights. And Gwen and I had just started dating, and, she couldn't get enough of me. So every Monday night, even though I was tired from my class, I'm just kidding. In all seriousness, though, you know what it's like to be young and in love. You can't get enough of each other. So sneak off at night to be with the one who you love. And church, that's actually what the dark night of the soul is about. It's about a soul longing to be with the one who it loves. So on a dark night, the soul slips away to be with him. The darkness, it serves as a covering. Now stay with me here. The darkness, it serves as a covering, and hidden from everything else, the soul can proceed in a way that it never could in the daylight. Because in the daylight, everything is visible, right? In the daylight, we're easily influenced by what we can see and by what we know other people can see. So we're always operating out of fear and hesitancy, and we hold ourselves back to manage our image, and we curate ourselves, and we filter, and we act, and we put on the mask because we know that everyone's looking and everyone's watching and everyone can see us. But church, that is exactly what keeps us from experiencing true love and intimacy with God. our hesitancy for our performance and our perfection and our mask to all come out. So that's why in this story, the soul slips away at dark. But before we romanticize the dark is still the dark. It's disorienting and confusing and terrifying at times, especially if you've only grown accustomed to navigating your life in the daylight. The dark can be quite shocking, quite hard to go through. The dark night of the soul is still a scary place. There's real suffering there. There's real fear and real uncertainty. And if you've been in one of those seasons, you know what I'm talking about. Real fear, real uncertainty, real doubts. That happens at night, and the dark night of the soul. As St. John of the Cross wrote, every step forward feels fragile and uncomfortable. And you must learn to move forward without light or guide. There's no playbook for how you move forward in the dark. But when everything else is stripped away, it's in the dark where you finally discover something. Your longing for God is your light. It's all you really have, and it's all you really need. You don't need your daytime performance. You don't need your strength or your abilities or your confidence, not the image that you've carefully curated, not what you think, not what they think, not whether things are finally gonna go your way. In the dark, all you've got is your longing to be with the beloved. That's all you have. In the dark, that's all there is. And in the end, that's all that really matters. As he's reflecting his story and coming to a close, St. John of the Cross wrote in his story, this longing only for God, not the things that come from God. That's different. We can love the gifts that come from God, sure. I love peace, and I love freedom, and I love joy, and I love grace, and I love when things get turned around, and I love this. I love all the things that come from God. But when we learn to long only for God himself, that longing, he wrote, proves surer than the light of noonday and more lovely than the dawn. Because that longing leads you straight to the heart of the beloved. And you're not worried about all that other stuff. I just want you. Open up the Psalms and read them. All through the Psalms, Psalm after Psalm after Psalm is people, authors going through this dark night of the soul. I mean, they're wrestling deeply. Where are you, God? Why is this happening? Why have I done that? And yet so many times the Psalm turns and says, yet you, God. Yet I know you, God. Yet you are my hiding place, God. But you only get there through the dark night of the soul. In the dark, stripped of all illusion and all control, the soul is united with the beloved and transformed in his presence. See, the imagery of this poem is very deep. It's one of those, you in college, it's one of those probably courses that could run all semester just studying the depth of what St. John of the Cross wrote. But if you don't get any of this other stuff, and maybe you're like, what is this guy talking about? This seems crazy. Just here it is. This is your takeaway. Listen to me. The experiences in our lives, the dark nights of the souls that feel like spiritual desolation, confusion, all of the confounding, painful experiences, whatever that is for you, the dark places are often the places where we learn who God truly is. And as hard as they are to go through, those dark places are where we actually really get to know him. It's easy to come and sing songs. It's easy to open your Bible and read the pages, but until you've been through the dark night of the soul, they're just words. They really leap off the page when you know what it's like to be in the pit, to be in the darkness, to have no other way. A few years ago, I was going through my own dark night of the soul. And I was overcome with doubt and confusion and fear and you name it, all of it. And I'll never forget this. I was listening to the song Jireh, which means the Lord will provide. Jireh, you are enough, and I will be content in every circumstance. You are Jireh. You are enough, forever enough, always enough, more than enough. I sang that song a bunch of times. Singing. I love the song. And I don't care if you think I'm crazy. But in that dark night, I heard God clearly say to me, am I? Am I enough for you? And in that moment, I've never felt closer to him. Ever. I wouldn't want to go back to what I was facing in that moment. The circumstances that we have to go through aren't good. They're not fun. I would never want to go back there. But you listen to me. Hearing that voice in that moment, I almost miss it. I almost miss it. I'm not saying that God isn't in the daytime and when the sun's shining. The reality is, church, that God is always near to you. He is always close. He doesn't go on vacation and come back. God does not fluctuate based on how we feel about him. The truth of Scripture is that he sticks closer than a brother through it all. But at least for me in my life, and I'm sure it's probably been true for you too, I've experienced that closeness most intimately in the dark. The dark. The story of Joseph is a popular one, so spoiler, you may know that his story ends in the palace, right? You probably know that it ends, it's redeemed of the situation. We've talked about this, but listen to me, don't skip past the pit. The pit is where you really get to know who God is. And that's what makes the dark night as difficult as it may be. That's what makes the dark night a gift. It's a gift. Maribel Starr, reflecting on this poem, she wrote this. It's a prayer. Take my juicy spiritual feelings and dry them up, and then please light them on fire. Take my lofty spiritual concepts and plunge them in the darkness and then burn them. Let me only love you. Let me quietly and with unutterable simplicity just love you. Now that's a prayer. That's a prayer. See, the dark night of the soul is the place where you really get to know who God is. And church, there was not a darker night in human history than the dark night where Jesus hung on a cross. The darkest night, when his body was broken and his blood was shed for us. But in that moment, that's where we really got to know who God is. He's a God who would send his only son to be beaten, forsaken, betrayed, because he loved us. That's the dark night of the soul. It was in the darkness, on that cross where God showed us exactly the kind of God he is. And that's what he does for you. It's in your dark night. Everything else is gone. Feelings are gone. Things aren't going your way. It's in that moment, in that dark night, where God shows you who he really is. He's a God who never leaves and who sticks and walks with you through the valley of the shadow of death. It's probably a pretty dark place, but it's there where you feel his comfort. It's there where you feel his hands holding you. And I don't wish a dark night on anybody, but it is a gift to go through those seasons and to feel him hold you. That's who he is. On the night he was betrayed, he took the bread, he broke it, and he passed it to all of his disciples. He said, "This is my body broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Then he took the cup and he passed it to all of his disciples. And he said, "This cup is the blood of the new covenant shed for you. As often as you drink it, do this in remembrance of me." There's not a better picture to be reminded this morning that God meets us in the darkness. He meets us in the pit. And as bad as those things are to go through, as horrible Joseph felt being thrown into that pit by his own family, head off to Egypt where he had no clue where he was going, I know in that moment he began to know who God really was. A God who sticks, a God who works all things together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. So as we take communion this morning, Jesus said to do this in remembrance of me. We are remembering what Jesus has done. And I want you to call to mind, if you're going through a dark night of the soul, call to mind that nobody knows what you're going through more than Jesus, who was betrayed and walked through the darkest night you could ever imagine. All because he loved you, so he could walk through it all with you too. He loves you.